So yeah, we're just going to get right into it. So how we're going to structure this, there's the questions that I prepared for our panelists, but then we're also going to have a Q&A at the end so that you guys can actually speak to them. Because I love the mic. You know, when I'm on the mic, I can stay for here like for the longest. So I just want to get to it. So I'll start the first section of our panel is the shift from hustler to creative entrepreneur, which is the mentality that I think all of us need to have. Because when we start our creative pursuits, it's just you in the bedroom there, you're sketching, you're drawing and making music, but there's a point where you need to actually shift from the hustle to being a creative entrepreneur. So I'll start with Terrence. What mindset shifts do you think creatives need to have in order to start treating their creativity as a business? I'll read that again. What mindset shifts do you think creatives need to have in order to start treating their creativity as a business?
And I had to get the hard question. Alright, so that's a really brilliant question, Liz. And I don't know if I can speak for all creatives, but I can speak for the mindset shift I needed to have, and hopefully that resonates with them, because I don't assume that I know more than anyone else in this room. But for me, the big mindset shifts, there were a couple of them. The first one was, when I started, I used to think a lot about my problems. So the first time I started getting into enterprise was because I was about to be kicked out of school, right? Then my dad got fired, and so it was like tragedy pushed me into a space where I needed to make a plan. But at the heart of it was, I was focused on my problems. And then it didn't work at the beginning, because I think sometimes when you go into spaces and all you're thinking about is what you need done, it begins to show with the people you are talking to after a certain point in time. Usually when they ask you about the price, that's when it begins to sort of show that you are working from a place of desperation. Most of the time you're either very cheap or very, very expensive, you're not in touch, and you speak according to what you want. So the big mindset shift for me then was when I realized that, look, the only way I get better, or the only way I can earn, is when I start focusing on the person I'm talking to, what are they going to do? So in the conversation, when I'm having a conversation with someone and their eyes light up, or they pick up and get attention, I know that I'm onto something. So the first one for me was, it's not about the problems I have, because my problems are not going to solve, are not going to get solved by me focusing on them. But the solution lies in me focusing on other people's problems. So the moment I started realizing, one of my first businesses or hustles was in college, where I realized that, and probably when I set out my age here, that with the exchange rates, things that were happening, I could go to Civics Mall and surrounding malls and buy t-shirts, hip-hop wear, and all those kinds of things. Because I was studying in South Africa. So I'd buy those, come home, change my rent, buy those tees, and they'll probably come in about, I can't remember the price, but it was a fairly low price at the end. It was definitely lower than 100 rand. And I could take those teams, and I spent some time watching the Zimbabweans on campus, and I realized that the hip-hop culture was alive and strong. And a lot of the students who were there, especially those from private schools or from overseas, had the budgets to pay for these things. So when I showed up with Echo, Nike, and all these nice brands to teach them were like very catchy. I would probably not have worn them, but they were wearing them. I ended up being able to sell them for like 300. So at 3x, 5x, 10x, my price was, my focus now was on what is the next person about. So I think when I look at business now, I think a lot of it has to come down to, if I'm going to write a song, am I writing a song for me, or am I writing a song that I want to resonate with the kind of person that would that I can connect with? So it's not like saying what's making money, I'm going to write about that. No. It's what's my story. In my case, my story is I needed to get behind. How many people are going through this, right? So if you're going through this, you're talking about my customer in the clothes space, right? But maybe in other creative spaces, the people who are going through what you are going through, if you can say I'm having this problem, who else has this problem? And what kind of conversations can I start having around that problem? And then hopefully if I figure out how to solve it, I can then put it out there so that you're connecting more people. So that was number one. The second thing I think we need to believe a bit more in how special you are. I think if I was to ask you this group, do you know what you do better than 10,000? Like by show of hands, how many of us know what we do better than 10,000 other people? show of hands means raising them up in the air, right? Okay, at least there's some people, right? The mere fact that a very few of us raise our hands is a problem, because I tell you that our mindset doesn't see value in ourselves. So it's very difficult for you to build something big if you can't even be your own shape. And if you can't even tell the next person that this is what I want, this is why you need to be listened to, this is why I need to be. Because that's the thing, a lot of people buy into confidence, and confidence first comes with you being able to confide in yourself. So I think a lot of the things, one of the mindset, and I can go on forever, the second mindset shift that I think is particularly critical is that we must go through life with power and expectations. Walk into every room believing that you deserve to be in there, and they are privileged to have you in there. It's not arrogance, and the reason why you need to know what you're better than 10,000 other people is so that, because that's your value, that's what gets you through the door, and when you start speaking, that's what keeps you in. So the conversation now needs to become, I must be on a treasure hunt to figure out what makes me different. So when people say, why you don't even have to ask yourself why. So I think that's a big part of the work that I spend my time doing. Is like, how do I find how people discover the aspect of their creativity, that when they are doing whatever they're doing, they do it easy, and it's not difficult. There are things you do very easy, that come natural, that sometimes your friends say, you're such a good listener. How do you always have a plan? You never fall under pressure. The question now is, how do I monetize that unique aspect? Because I think that's, when you look at the world now, it's never been easier to build businesses now than ever before. Because before, you needed to be a generalist. You needed to know pretty much everything, right? Because there were proper job descriptions. Now, everyone's talking about the personal brand. Everyone's talking about what makes you special. So we now live in a world where everyone wants to know who you are and how you are brings value to their lives. So I think the mindset shift for us is to go back and say, what's special about me? And I know what's special about me is big enough to create room for me and build a business on the back of. So I think those two are the things that quickly come to mind. Solve problems and expect to win and bring your best.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for that. The next question is going to Naboth Rizla. When did you realize you needed to structure your creative hustle, and what was the very first step that you took? When did you realize you needed to structure your creative hustle, and what was the very first step that you took?
Okay, I think for me it was the fact that I was spending so much time doing the things that I love. Like, I was spending so much time reading, like I love to read. My mom is an English literature teacher, so there were books all around. So I grew up around books. So naturally, my spot was the library, because there was books. There was more books. You read the stuff that's there in the cabinet, and then you're like, hey, there's more books. And then there's the fun. That's when I got into high school, and then I got introduced to hip hop, and then I got into magazines. So now the thing was like, so with everything that I'm doing, I'm spending so much time reading so much and learning so much and knowing so much. And then you get infused in this culture for hip hop, and you're like, I'm doing this 99% of the time. I'm listening to the music, I'm trying to figure out what is this whole production about, I had so many questions about the whole thing. And then eventually you're like, I spend more time doing this stuff, so why not formalize it and make something for me? So all the reading of magazines and books and stuff ended up having, like, I'm not formally trained when it comes to writing. So it was just per chance, because we had a website. In Bulawayo, there was no hip-hop website. So all the businesses that I've created have come because they were not there when I was on the cover. So I'll get there, and there's no one giving platforms to artists to perform. I'll create the floor sessions. There'll be nothing to wear. I'll create my own merch. I'll wear my own t-shirts, So there was no one documenting what was happening in hip-hop in Bulawayo. It was all about Harare and stuff. So we created our own website, and the guys in South Africa heard about it. And that was like my first paid gig. I just submitted an article about Bulawayo hip-hop. And next thing, these guys are asking me, so what's exactly like what you say? How much do you charge? you know, and you're like, okay, you know. So because I was spending so much time writing and whatever, I turned that into a career, I monetized it. So I found a way of learning more. I had to go online and to try and figure out, and I was lucky enough to have an editor that was patient enough to teach me the ropes, to say the who's, where's, what, and all that stuff. You know, when you're still learning and you're still, you know, like the former. But because I've read so much from Source magazine to whatever, it was easy. And I naturally just collected the hip-hop magazines. And so it was a natural progression. Like, you couldn't tell me anything about what's the Source magazine or what's the Hype magazine. So for me, it was because I spent so much time, like we spend so much time writing lyrics, you spend so much time doing your poetry, you spend so much time doing your t-shirts or whatever, designing, writing. There's got to be a time where you then tell yourself, am I taking this to the next level or not? Am I going to formalize this? Am I going to eat off? Because you're already spending so much time on it. Yeah, so I think I was fairly young, and then the checks started coming in, so I was like, yo, you know, I need to get serious. I need to get serious. And the funny thing is, I thought my first check was going to come from the SKR, because I had a rap group when we started, and we happened to get signed. I don't know if a lot of people know this, but we got signed to an American record label that was called Nomadic Wax at the time, New York, to a 4-part. We didn't want to do it like an album with a 4-part song deal, whatever and stuff. So we thought, yo, the checks are coming, but it doesn't happen like that in music. So now this whole thing that just happened, just because I love hip hop, I know hip hop, I'm listening to the music, I know the artists, and I can reach the artists. It's easy for me to get to ASAP and say, yo, ASAP, can I interview for this, whatever, because I know him from way back, you know, and I know what he's done, and he trusts me with his brand, that I'm not going to write something funny or whatever, you know, so it becomes easy. So that's how I managed to. So that was the whole thing for me, because I was like, you know, I need to make something out of it.
Thank you so much for that. I hope you guys are actually learning a lot of things from what this young man is speaking, you know. One of the things that I've realized, just want to make a comment before I ask Mr. B the question. We already have structured schools on creativity in this country. Like every other profession, people can go to a certain institution and take a course or something. So this is the importance of things like this, because this is the only time we can actually get to learn in a structured format, right? So for Mr. Ndebele, my question is, with your work that you are doing with the Oasis Creators Hub, what are some of the mistakes that you see creatives make in the early stages of their creative pursuits? And what are some of the mistakes that you usually see creatives make?
Yeah, we all agree, mine's the hardest. I think, let me talk about the biggest mistake. You know, I think whether early stage or not, but I think that the biggest mistake that creatives make is that they see themselves as different from other entrepreneurs. And of course, I mean, kind of the product and the service, what you're selling is different from what so-and-so down the road is selling. But actually, what your end game is very similar. You want to have an impact on people's lives. You want to solve an issue in somebody's life, and you want to make money, right? And so I think that's the biggest mistake. So in other words, you need to set up a business. You need to be productive. You need to be appealing. You need to have good business etiquette. You need to apply good business principles. You need to be able to answer the question, how much profit did you make last year? A lot is not an answer. You know, you need to be able to say, if I say to you, okay, let's see your accounts. I wonder how many of us will be able to say, yeah, come, I'll show you my accounts. So I'd I'd say that's the biggest mistake that creators make, where we see our craft, we see our talent, and we know that we want to monetize it, but then somehow we don't figure that the rules of business apply to us. Do you know what I'm saying? So I might put on a show and 3 people show up, and what's the first thing I'm going to say? That's not how business works. That's not how business works. You know, if you know, bakers they don't have the right to say, do you know what I'm saying? They think differently. They say, okay, what is it that we're offering this market, and are we delivering value? And why is this value important to this customer? And who is this customer? And once I've taken care of this customer, is there another customer? Do you know what I'm saying? So yeah, you can hold a show and sell tickets. Is that the only way you're going to make money? Is that the only income stream that you have? And so I love what you're saying, and you know, I mean, here's a visual of kind of different avenues. You're saying, okay, here's this talent that I have. How am I going to express it, and how am I going to bring it in such a way that it delivers value to multiple customer segments? Okay, so if I've now figured out how to make $100, tick. All right, how do I level that up? What's next, and what's it going to take? What business strategy am I going to apply? Okay, so I think that's a lesson for all of us, that business doesn't just happen. You know, the people that we look up to, and we aspire to them, and we think, okay, I want to be like that. Well, have we counted the cost? Have we mapped the road that says, okay, if I want to get there, it goes through this stop, and this stop, and this stop. And it's a strategy, it's a plan, and then it's hard work every day to incrementally take yourself towards your destination.
Thank you so much for that.
As you're speaking, you felt compelled to share an example, just so that, because it really hit home. And my example is, I remember being told, I don't think any of us have been told, go to school, work hard, get good grades, and then you're also told, all right. So I listened, right, and I did that for college more than the other stages. And I remember somewhere along the lines, I got really good grades in P, and I don't think you can't get anything better at master's level than what I got, right? But what happened is, when I became a cum laude graduate, is that I thought it was now companies' jobs to offer me jobs and roll out the red carpet. So for some reason, because I had attained to a particular level, I thought the world owed me gratitude for how special I was. And no one offered me a job. Like, I got a job brand neat. The degree I thought was going to open the door didn't. And I think the attitude I had developed was wrong. The qualification was okay, but the attitude for me was, now, you need to come to me because I'm special. And I think I thought the world owed me, and the world disagreed, and guess who won? The world did. And only when I realized that people don't care what you have and how hard, and I think we make the mistake is sometimes I work very hard. No one's paying me to work very hard. Working hard is like the recipe to get tired, right? But when you work hard and they deliver that, like, would you care if I like food? If I told you this pie took me 10 hours to make, does it make any difference to you? Or if I said it took 5 minutes, your measure is the taste, right? So I think sometimes we get caught up in measuring the wrong things. How hard I've worked, how hard it's been growing up. And you feel like you've got all these reasons that are your reasons, but they're not the reasons that people will buy for. And I think only when I stepped out of that illusion that I was special because I had grades, and my specialness exempted me from going out and asking people, how can I help? The moment I stepped out of that, I think that's when I was able to start building businesses, because I was at a point where I was comfortable selling airtime in the master's degree, because I was like, this thing is not working right now. Let me do the thing that works. And I think for me, the moment I started searching for people and started talking less about what I have, and I think in the artist space with some of the organizations I'm working with, there's some amazing artists who come up with really good songs and really great material, but they're incredibly difficult to work with because they come with that attitude that you are here to serve me. But if I'm paying you, I think if you come with an attitude, I'm not saying make yourself like a slave, but if you come with an attitude that says, how can I serve you, right? Like when you come into a space where they invite you to come into a gig, you say, what is the outcome that you guys want? Like, what does success look like for you guys? And how can my talent deliver that for you? Like I've found anywhere where I go, be it for speaking conferences, when I come in and say, hey dude, what are you wanting to achieve? I don't want to talk about what I want to talk about, what do you want me to talk about? The moment you start doing that, people start liking you more. Because they're like, when this guy shows up, or when this lady shows up, they come to serve me, and I get to get the best out of them. And then the more I've done that, the more I've opened up verticals of, oh, I didn't know I could do that, but now I know, because I attempted now serving this particular individual. So I think when we turn I think creators are in a really great position, because your gift is there to see. Now can you look at your gifts and say, how do I run this like a business that just, and allow the people who say, can you come and do a show here? Instead of saying, I want to do this song, ask them, which songs would you have me do? And why do you want me to do those songs? And at the end of the day, what does winning look like for you? Because I want to make sure that once I get paid, you also, I think it can be a game changer for you.
Thank you so much for that. One thing that I'm liking about this is like it's now becoming more than I envisioned, is this gentleman actually giving out more than I expected, and I thank you so much for that. Now we're going to go to section number 2 of our panel. This is systems, business models, and structure. The first question is going to go to Mr. Ndebele. What are 3 key structures that a creative should build from the start? What are 3 key structures a creative should build from the start? You can talk about registration, contracts, and the finance, or anything else that you feel is valuable. So what are 3 key structures that you feel a creative should build from the start?